Hello and welcome to another Doctor Who Big Finish review. In this Doctor Who Big Finish review, I'll be looking at the 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 2, where we see the return of Billie Piper as Rose Tyler on Big Finish Audio. So yeah, I've been incredibly excited for this release, probably my most anticipated release for the second half of the year. As soon as it was announced, I pre-ordered it. I was just like, I'm not missing out on this because this is going to be one hell of an adventure. So without further ado, let's look how this limited edition set is presented. Then we'll go on to my thoughts on the actual story. So without further ado, let's look at the presentation. So here is the limited edition book. Now the difference with this is you get 2 extra discs and it's presented in this lovely book form. So the 2 extra discs you get is behind the scenes, and also you get the audio adventures of Doctor Who. So if you're a new listener, you get a taste of other Big Finish products. If you're an old time listener of Big Finish, that disc might be a thing you might want to skip. But if you haven't got some of those releases, it might be quite interesting to tempt you to buy those releases. So for the presentation, we have this lovely cover. We've got the Ice Warrior there, Rose, the Doctor, Jackie, a Zaross, and we have the TARDIS there with this sort of meteorite there. We've got the 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 2, full cast audio. The spine there, looking rather nice. There we go. And the back, so we have all 3 stories, so do feel free to pause if you want to know more about the stories there. And we have my limited edition number there. Despite me ordering it the day it was announced, I did get quite a high number. It is very much potluck with Big Finish with the limited edition. Removing the outer case, we have the lovely book itself, exactly the same as before. So if we open it up, we have this lovely page there of the cover. Then we have a montage of the 3 stories there. We have Disc 1, Infamy of the Zaross. Then we have Disc 2, The Sword of the Chevalier. Then we have Executive Producer's Notes by Jason Hay Gallery. And then again we have them by Nick Briggs, and we have the 10th Doctor there. And then the other page we have Writer's Notes and a little montage of the first story, Infamy of the Zaross. Then we have Writer's Notes and a montage of the Sword of the Chevalier. And then again with the third story, Cold Vengeance there. Then we have Producer's Notes by David Richardson. A lovely photo of the 10th Doctor there, an advertisement for Volume 1. Then we have cast photos there. So I'll just quickly flick through these. There we go. Then some other cast members who star within this release. Got a lovely photo of all the crew there, and then some more cast photos there. So if we quickly flop through these, and then we have sort of credits there, as you can see, and then we have a lovely montage of the foes within this story, very much reminiscent of the Radio Times release back when Series 2 was launched. Then we have the other disc, so we have Cold Vengeance there, behind the scenes, and the audio adventures of Doctor Who, and that's the final page for this release. Infamy of the Zaross, probably the most new series style story of the set, as John Dorney has captured the essence of Russell T Davies, especially in the first 5 minutes, which did put a smile on my face, and the music does have that Murray Gold sound to it. The story itself does start off like a fun comedic romp, but once the big twist happens within the story does take a very dark / twisted turn, with it showing death, which doesn't happen often in the new series. God, I sound like a horrible person saying that death is good, but it's quite nice that there is consequences within the actions within the story, so that's one thing what I like about this story. One thing I will say about this story is it's very intriguing, full of twists and turns, and the final 20 minutes the story ramps up to a whole new level. So the threat level also is pretty high. This being set in Norwich, I know, lovely Norwich, and this story itself isn't your typical Earth invasion. The pacing wise, this story, right from the word go, it just rockets by. It doesn't have an off switch, it's fast moving, and the main questions are, who are the Zaross? And the story itself does continue the Series 2 arc. Characters, the Doctor, David Tennant. Yes, he slips back into the role effortlessly. I feel like he's more comfortable now on the audio medium, so it's great. So this story, we see him as that sort of happy-go-lucky chap, which I really do like, but when the events do turn, we see the fury of the Time Lord with him becoming quite aggressive and forceful, and getting some real great speeches within this release. Wonderful performance by David Tennant, just real force to be reckoned with within this release once he gets angered. Rose Tyler, Billie Piper. One thing to note, Rose certainly doesn't sound as urban as she did before. So yeah, Billie Piper doesn't sound exactly like Rose, but you can forgive her because this is her first time on Big Finish. Now, the story really just sort of capture how settled she is into the Doctor's world, as we see her being very independent, taking charge, you know, showing her authoritative side. So it's quite nice to see that this story is quite late on within sort of series 2, because we have references to the Cybermen, so it's kind of after sort of midway through series 2, I guess. And it just shows how settled Rose is into the Doctor's world. Jackie, played by Camille Kajori. Now this is the first time I have listened to Jackie on audio, and honestly she is one of the highlights of this story for me, as she sees events through Rose's eyes, so she sees the wonders of space through Rose's eyes, which is rather touching. We do see her famous slap, and yeah, she sticks up for Rose, she gets some wonderful funny moments, and she's just really bubbly and just a joy to listen to, and just a great addition to this story. Zaross, played by George Asprey, quite a pushy, take no prisoners kind of monster. They don't dawdle, they're fairly sinister, but towards the end of the story they do become quite dopey, but they're very interesting. So what are my overall thoughts on Infamy of the Zaross? Well, overall I think it captures the era perfectly, with full of interesting twists, and it fits into series 2 rather well. Exactly what you need to kick off this set with a fun quirky story, with nice twists and cheeky references to the Centaurites and the land of fiction. A perfect story for new listeners, but also a joy for old listeners as well. So my overall rating for Infamy of the Zaross is a 9 converse out of 10. A wonderful start for the set. Right, the second story, The Sword of the Chevalier by Guy Adams. So this is another hit. Answer, yes. This story I feel is catered for everyone, as it does have that very new series feel to it, with the story reminding me of Tooth and Claw and Girl in the Fireplace, 2 of my favourite episodes from series 2. So you have that for new listeners, but for all time listeners, you will enjoy it, as it does have a very classic feel to it. Though the style of the story is very new series, but the way the story is told is very classic Who, with the pre-title sequence really selling the story from the off, with it setting the threat on its way to Earth, and the Doctor and Rose deciding where to go. And that scene, I feel Guy Adams just captured the Doctor and Rose's friendship, with the Doctor describing all these exotic places. Instead he decides to take Rose to Slough in the 1700s. And yeah, that's quite funny, because Slough is a bit of a dump, and I don't think much has changed over 300 years. So yeah, we do have this lovely contrast of the opening with the whole sinister side with the monster, and this nice fun bubbly side with the 10th Doctor and Rose on their way as well. So yes, this is the historical story of the set, and it does follow the new series pattern of the Doctor and companion meet historical figure, set historical figure joins the adventure. And I will say, dare I say it, this is quite educational, as I have never heard of the Chevalier Dion, which is a very interesting historical figure, and Guy Adams does a wonderful job filling you in on this historical figure, giving the backstory for her. Pacing wise, I think this story flows rather well, as it just has the right pace, as it does build suspense rather well. You know, why is the Doctor concerned by this threat? And we do have great light-hearted moments throughout the story, but we do have some very sinister bits within the story as well. It has a great balance, this story, and that's one thing I like. The pacing is just right, and the balance is just wonderful, and the ending is rather unique and quite interesting, to say the least. And the Doctor finally gets his ice cream. The Doctor, David Tennant, now he slips into the role effortlessly, as you would expect, with this story really showing that boyish delight that the 10th Doctor had when he first meets the Chevalier Dion, and the enthusiasm when he's sort of deciding where to go and looking at technology. We also see his fighting hand back with him in fencing match, and uses the sword quite a bit. And I love the great urgency that he has, that he wants to stop this threat. So he really does sell you on that this threat means business. And of course the 10th Doctor has some rather Rose, played by Billie Piper, I've got to say, well characterised. I feel Billie Piper feels more comfortable within this release, but she's finally settled into the audio medium. So yeah, Billie Piper, well, Rose I should say, is quite flirty within this, but not too in your face. It's just very subtle. So Guy Adams did a rather good job of that. And I like that she's not amused by the Doctor. She's just taking none of his nonsense, which I just love. Even though she likes to take the mick out of the Doctor within this, so it's quite nice. She's quite sarky. But at her core, we do see the strong, feisty nature of Rose within this story. Chevalier Dion, played by Nicholas Grace, a historical figure, what just fits so well with the 10th Doctor and Rose. She is very gung-ho, flamboyant, and just wanting to prove herself that she is still relevant and doesn't want to fade away into history. and the story really does utilise her backstory, and Nicholas Grace does a brilliant job bringing her to life. Now on to the monster of the story, Hempel and Jockster. Again, a very classic style monster, what again fits the story extremely well, and I just love the concept of it. It's what the Exorbiloth should have been. Yeah, and when they kill people you hear the bones crunch and you can hear blood dripping. Honestly, I just love the threat within the story. So Hempel, played by Lucy Briggs-Owen, very much the brains of the operation, smooth, sinister and just damn right creepy and very mocking and degrading. Then we have Jockster, played by Mark Elstop, again very sinister but a bit more gruesome than Hempel, and a bit demented in a way, and very much the business side of it all. I just love the threat of it, this just fits so well. So what are my overall thoughts on the Sword of the Chevalier? I think that it is a wonderful historical adventure, with it capturing both sides of the Doctor's scope, with it being a perfect listen for any Doctor Who fan. And this story just has the perfect balance of thrills, scares and fun. And it's just a wonderful incorporation of a historical figure, plenty of action to be had, just everything just seems so right for this story. The monster, the pacing, it just has the right balance and it's just a wonderful story. So I'm going to give Sword of the Chevalier 9 Converse out of 10. On to the final story of the box set for the 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 2, Cold Vengeance by Matt Fitton. Now this is my most anticipated story from the set, as we see the Doctor I grew up with face one of my favourite monsters, the Ice Warriors. And this is the first returning monster what Big Finish have done for the 10th Doctor, so it's quite nice that Big Finish didn't go all out in the first volume and treat us to a returning monster just to play even more safe, but it's quite nice with Volume 2 that we see quite an obscure classic monster come back, I guess. So what do I think of the story? Well, I feel the story is the most classic story of the bunch. Of this story, I would say is about 90% classic Who, and then the rest is kind of a sprinkle of the new series. With the story very much reminding me of the Siege of Death and the Monster of Paladin, with the story playing on the honour of the Ice Warriors. So we do have this very classic base under siege run around story, with the Doctor and Rose landing in essentially a giant freezer, a perfect hiding place for the Ice Warriors, and the Ice Warriors want revenge from a war what happened 500 years ago, and that's basically the plot for this story. But for me, the story does lack on a few things. One big thing is the sense of occasion, that the Ice Warriors are a big deal and they mean business, and they are a monster from the classic years, so I feel like they should have had a bit more of a fuss around them. Like if Russell T Davies was doing this in series 2, I feel like Russell T Davies would have made a bit more of a fuss, where I just feel like because we've been introduced to them in the new series with Cold War, but it's kind of just like, oh, it's just the Ice Warriors. So I feel like it doesn't have that sense of occasion what I would have liked to have had. Because at the end of the day, I feel like the way the Doctor and Rose treat the Ice Warriors within this story, it's just another day at the office. Now there is this sort of tragedy and emotional side and an emotional impact within the story, but I just don't think that side of the story and that aspect fully lands within the story. It just falls a bit flat for me. But the core of the story I will say is quite a good moral story, with the whole sort of showing the beauty and the wonder of humanity, and that showing that it's just as flawed as the Ice Warriors. So yeah, quite a nice little story, but it does fall flat on a few things. On to characters now. The Doctor, the 10th Doctor, very much the same complement to what I've said in the previous stories, you know, very much like the same as he was in series 2, which is great, fun, comedic. And I just love the concern he has within the story, and I love the scenes what he has when he's confronting the dark and deadly situations within this adventure. Rose, Billie Piper, again, very much the same stuff what I've said in the previous one, but I will say that this is probably the story she has the most to do. You know, she very much does stand on her own 2 feet, especially in the latter half of the story. The Ice Warriors, played by Nick Briggs. This story is marketed as a new series Ice Warrior story. Look, new series Ice Warrior. Instead, they sound very much like their classic Ice Warrior selves, which is not a problem because I love the Ice Warriors and I'm just happy that they're featuring in another story. But I think the main problem I have with this is that the marketing for this release is misleading. So for expecting the Ice Warriors to sound very new series like they were in Cold War and Empress of Mars, you're not going to get that. The closest you'll get to an Ice Warrior sounding like the new series one is the Ice Lord figure. So yeah, I feel like maybe another person voicing them would just help boost up a bit, just help give it a bit more difference, to sort of help differentiate them, because I feel like the Ice Warriors, what Nick does, are good, but I just feel like another person would have just aided and boosted them up a little bit more. I will say that there is a sense of danger from them, and I love the way that they're introduced with them sort of bursting from the ice, and the story does play that them being this very honourable race, which I do like. So what are my overall thoughts on Cold Vengeance? I will say it is a pretty decent story, but it just falls short on a few hurdles, making the story lack on a few things, like the sense of occasion. Like, this is a big deal, because I feel like if Russell T Davies was writing this, he would have made a bit more of a fuss around the Ice Warriors, but this is a classic monster coming back. Instead, I feel like they're treated like, oh, they've had the Ice Warriors before in Cold War, people know what they are, so I feel like it would have been nice just to have dealt with it as fresh. The Ice Warriors, I will say, were well written. I think Matt Fitton captured the Ice Warriors rather well, being this very honourable race, which I really did like that he captured that. But I just think when the Ice Warriors come to the performance side, I find it a bit higgledy-piggledy, especially the way the Ice Warriors are finished. I think that I don't like the way the Ice Warriors end up within the story, and also the marketing side. I just think it's very misleading, and it just causes a few clashes for me within this story. So I'm just, yeah, I think that's my main problem, that there's a few clashes with the Ice Warriors, but overall I like the way they're generally written within the story. So when I did finish listening to Cold Vengeance, I did come up with a story going, wow, was that it? I did feel very underwhelmed. You know, I do think the story is fairly enjoyable, but I just think it's an outing where you shouldn't get your hopes up. I think that's a prime example. Don't overhype things, because I think that's my main problem. I hype this release up so much, and I come out very underwhelmed. So I think don't hype this release up, because it is quite a stripped back story, very simplistic, and very much a run around adventure. But yeah, I feel like when the story does something good, it does it brilliantly. I just think that it falls short on a few hurdles, like the sense of occasion, the Ice Warriors, just those sort of things, and the whole sort of emotional side of the story just didn't really land right. It just, yeah, it just felt like a very odd element within the story. But yeah, if you like the Seeds of Death and Monster Paladin, then maybe you want to check this release out. So what would I give Cold Vengeance? Well, I think I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 Converse. That might change if I re-listen to it again. It might go higher, it might go lower. But for now, I'm just going to stay at a 7. You know, I'm pondering a 6, but right now I'm just going to say 7. So what are my overall thoughts on the 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 2? Well, I think Big Finish listened to what people said about Volume 1, with the main criticism being that the stories were very simple, Big Finish playing it safe. And I will say that this release still kind of has that element to it, but I feel like the ideas and the stories what Big Finish are telling are a bit more outside the box in the way that they tell them, so I quite like that. So they have improved that, and I feel like the story quality has improved, and I feel like the 10th Doctor is very much Big Finish's take on the 10th Doctor, which I quite like, that Big Finish have actually mastered how to write for the 10th Doctor on audio. I know a lot of people have been very sort of not getting this release because of Rose, but I'm not really a Rose hater. I think she's great in Series 1, and Series 2 she's just alright, so I think Rose is an alright character. But just remember, Big Finish have redeemed some of the least popular companions like Mel. They've redeemed the 6th Doctor, so Big Finish have worked their magic with Rose, and yeah, she's really enjoyable on audio. Like I say, with most box sets, there is a story for everyone to enjoy. You've got the fantastic contemporary, you've got the wonderful historical story, and you've got the sci-fi thriller. Yeah, just this box has something for everyone to enjoy. Yeah, and I just absolutely love it. I think that this is definitely a step in the right direction for the 10th Doctor on audio. I just absolutely love it. It's just a real delight to listen to, and it's just great to hear more 10th Doctor, and I'm quite surprised how soon we've got the 10th Doctor back and David Tennant doing it on audio. So yeah, I think that this is a wonderful release, step in the right direction. 3 very interesting stories, and yeah, just a wonderful release. So overall, I'm going to give the 10th Doctor Adventures Volume 2 an overall score of 8 out of 10. A wonderful release, and definitely worth checking out if you've got a bit of cash lying around. Just fun, it's just wonderful to hear Jackie back with the 10th Doctor and Rose. It's just an absolute delight to listen to, and I just think that the stories are a lot more imaginative in that way. That they're not as simple as you would expect. They're very Big Finish's version of the 10th Doctor, like I keep saying. So yeah, that concludes this review. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I'll see you in my next review, whatever that will be. So thank you very much, and bye bye.